You just need to press, got it. That's great. I think it's just my face that appears, but obviously if you'd rather not risk it, you can go and hide your face. So we are going to start by dreaming some dreams and imagining. The report on the Justice Seeking Church that came to the conference ended with an invitation to imagine what a justice seeking church could be like. If our churches locally, and if the Methodist Church in Britain truly becomes a justice seeking church, it's going to change us. It's going to change what we do, how we worship, how we relate to one another and to our communities and to God. So what's that going to look like? I would like to invite you just to dream some dreams. They don't have to be realistic. They have to be wonderful and huge and inspiring and God-filled. I'd like to invite you to dream a dream of the kinds of things that a justice-seeking church would look like. What would that church look like to you? What might it be doing? What might it feel like? What might it seem like? How might it appear to people? So I'd like to invite you to go into groups. Katie's going to put you into a group if you'd like to accept that in a minute, and come up with 3 dreams. You can come up with many more than 3 dreams. Aim for 3 and then keep adding to them, describing what a justice-seeking church might look like in your dreams. You're going to have a maximum of 5 minutes, and then we'll invite you back. Hello, everybody, and welcome back. Can I encourage you, as you come back into the room, to start putting into the chat your dreams of what a justice-seeking church might look like. You start putting those in, and then we'll look at those together. Give you a few minutes just to get to, well, a few moments just to get typing. So if we were a justice-seeking church, Andrew says that we would be remembering that justice is local as well as international, and says we would be practicing what we preach, and we'd be preaching what we practice as well, which would be good. Steve and Suzanne say the default question would be what we can and should do rather than why should we do it. I like that, starting in a different place. Jenny reminds us that we'd be wanting to work or support in partnership with others, recognising that others have greater skills and knowledge so that the impact can be bigger than just the Methodist Church. That's a great starting point. Denise dreams of a church that's flexible, not meeting on a Sunday, but working around the new ways that doing our 9 to 5 post-COVID. And Linda dreams of us being vocal when we see injustice. Kate and Sam, you came up with a couple of ones in our remnant group. Do you want to say what those were?
Sorry, I'm just typing an answer to someone. No, I'm typing an answer to someone in the chat.
I'm asking you to multitask there.
Yes, I can't remember what I said now. What did I say?
You were talking about a church that's gone back to its roots.
I have. Yeah, I was.
Mm.
Risky, passion, energy, less concerned about the service on a Sunday and more concerned about our neighbour next door and what was affecting their lives. Being vocal. And Sam talked about being church, not in the church, but out on the streets, in protests, in pubs. I think that's
great. Thank you. David talks about being part of our local community, so we're aware of issues and concerns and work alongside others to address them. Denise reminds us to be more ecumenical, again, seeking out partnerships so we can meet local needs. Oh, Beth, I love this. Every church will have a greenhouse and a welcome time, a listening time every day in its premises. All right, I love that. That's beautiful. So all sorts of dreams and visions of what a justice-seeking church could be like, transforming the way that we relate to each other, the way we relate to our communities, the way that our relationship with God is transformed through worship. It could be very different. That's one of the things that we're going to explore today, and draw out those themes of how things could be different for us and for the world. We're in this place of being and becoming, aren't we? We can already recognize what's happening. We can see glimmers or glimpses of what is already happening. We hear and see stories of churches that are already being transformed, churches that are being transformed by people who are seeking asylum, people who are coming as refugees, and are seen by many people in the media and in politics as people who need to be condemned and criticized and demonized in so many ways. But actually, within our churches are just immensely grateful, expressing huge gratitude for the life and the inspiration and the gift that so many asylum seekers are bringing to communities and to congregations. There is a glimmer of hope of what the world could be like. Within your own district, I was talking this, oh Beth, this might relate to your greenhouse. I was talking to somebody whose church has responsibility for an allotment, and they're the people on the church and also in the wider community work that allotment, and the produce is given regularly to the food bank. So as well as the cans and the packages, people get a veg box as well, and seeing veg still with the soil on it that is grown by people that they know just gives a whole new sense of relationship. And for the people who come along and work the land and get their hands muddy, get that reconnection with the land, that healing sense of connection with the land. Really, yes, the healing sense that we are all made in the image of God, and that connection with creation. And then we've all heard stories of churches which are sparks. We heard that with Noel's story last time, didn't we, about the church as a spark for this just transition movement. But we've also heard it from churches that take up this partnership role that Jenny's just mentioned, not feeling that they need to do everything or can't do everything, but they can help create the space. They can say, shall we do this? Or what can we do? Or into this, we have some buildings to offer, or some people, or some ideas, or some money. What can we do together? And draw together partners and stakeholders and people who want to be involved, creating the space for others to give, others to offer their agency into a situation. Churches can be the spark for this. We're seeing glimmers, aren't we, of this justice-seeking church, of how things can be. This isn't something that's an unimaginable world. We can imagine it because sometimes we see the glimmers of what's already happening. What I'd like to do this evening is to introduce you to the Justice Seeking Church report, which I'm just going to show you here. This is the report that went to the Methodist Conference this year, which offers a framework for us to understand how we can go about really trying to embed this commitment to being a justice-seeking church. Now, some of you may be already very familiar with it. Like me, you might sleep with it under your pillow, and others of you may not have come across it before. So if you already know it really, really well, my apologies, but we're going to kind of walk through it and talk about some of the ways in which the challenges and the ideas contained within the report might relate to where you are and what's happening for you at the moment. So I'll introduce bits of it, and then we'll break for bits of conversation. If you want to read more about the report, and if you want to get hold of the short document, I'm just walking and chewing gum and trying to put this into the chat, which I will just do. The link to where you can find out more is just here. If you follow that link and follow the link to the report, you can order a copy of this from Methodist Publishing. They're free and you just pay for postage, and I think you pay a very similar amount for postage whether you order 1 or 70,000. So please order them for people in your church or your friends and family for Christmas. But it's a shorter version of the report that went to conference, and it contains questions for conversation or for reflection. But if you want to know more about after this evening, that's a good place to start. So when the Methodist Conference started this conversation about what it means to be a justice-seeking church, we did something close to what Kate was just talking about, going back to our roots. When we talk about Methodism and social justice, very often we lean on our history, don't we? On some of the stories that mean a lot to us. From our past, from our denominational past or denominations, because we came from one and went into many and have come back into one. The stories that have those justice threads, and whether it's the Tolpuddle martyrs or a whole range of different stories, there are a range of different themes or certain themes that flow through our history that help make that link from where we were to where we are. Now, those threads, those golden threads, aren't always unbroken. They're not always apparent, but they help to anchor us in our past. And they're things like always having a key option for people who are the poorest in society, always having a commitment or trying to have a commitment to being alongside people, finding that or enabling that leadership from the margins, enabling people, as with the Tolpuddle martyrs, to know and believe that they were beloved children of God, and receiving through being local preachers the ability to speak and to lead in the trade union movement, enabling people to lead from the margins. These different themes that we see coming through the Methodist denominations. But we also recognise that there have been times when we have got it wrong, when we have colluded with injustice. And so it's just as important to name those times of collusion and of injustice within our own denomination, and to recognise those, to apologise, to try to put right, and to learn from them and to do things differently in the future. If we had more time, I'd invite you to just reflect on what are your stories, what links you back, what do you draw on when you think about Methodism, or where your own tradition that you come from that links you back into a sense of justice. But those are some of the key ones that the Methodist Conference has identified and rooted its commitment to justice. Alongside that, it did a significant piece of work around the theology of justice. What are the particular strands of theological understanding that the Methodist Church again calls on when it's thinking about justice? And again, you can read those in the report. But the thing that I wanted to explore with you most this evening are the three key things that make up the framework for the Justice Seeking Church report. Now, I'm going to try and share my screen and I always do a bit of kind of failing to walk and chew gum here. So let's just see if this one works. I might need you to tell me what you can actually see.
That's fine, Rachel.
Oh, brilliant. Hey, that's wonderful. Thank you. It does mean I've lost my notes, but it's fine. I think we can cope with this. So the Justice Seeking Church framework is made up of 3 parts. You can tell I'm a minister's daughter because there's 3 things, and they all start with the same letter. So principles, priorities, and practices. And these are the ones that I will go through in greater depth with you. But they ask basically 3 questions. What does God's justice look like to us? What is ours to do? And what do we do, and how do we do it? And I hope that those 3 questions will make as much sense whether you're working in the connectional team like I am, trying to work out what to do, whether you're in a district policy committee, or whether you're in a local church, asking what is God saying to us, what is ours to do, and how do we do it? And I hope that this framework, this justice-seeking framework, will help us to think through how we're being called to respond in this particular time and place. So I'm going to go through each of those, the principles, the priorities, and the practices. But to stop me talking non-stop now for 20 minutes, I'm going to talk about each one, and then we'll have a break and go into groups for 5 minutes and answer just one question. And then come back and either feedback together or put things in the chat before we move on. So the first one I want to talk about is the principles. What does God's justice look like? What is it that gives us the foundations, the kind of underpinning for our understanding of justice? Because we don't always agree. We won't all vote in the same way in the forthcoming election. We disagree about justice because it's often about things that are scarce. It's about power. It's about resources. It's about money. It's about who has access to things. So we end up disagreeing. But if we can identify the things where we are anchored or where we have our foundations in our understanding of God's justice, perhaps we can begin in a different place. We may end up disagreeing, but actually can we at least have our conversations in a place where we can agree with what we agree together? And I hope that will help us when we start to wrestle with new issues of injustice, the new difficult things. What the conference did was to identify 6 simple summaries almost of what was felt to sum up a sense of where we see God's justice throughout the Bible, throughout our understanding of where we see God's justice. And you'll see some of them there in front of you. A belief that everyone is made in the image of God, that throughout the Bible we see God's bias to those who are in poverty or experiencing marginalization. A belief that there is a special responsibility for those who have power to enact justice, to be just. God's longing for justice is God's longing for the flourishing of creation and humanity within creation. A call on all people and nations actively to work for peace and for justice. And then finally, the call to justice is a call to live in ways that reflect God's character and the pattern of God's kingdom. It's not just what you do, it is how we live and how we learn to be closer to God. And this will be very small, so you probably won't be able to read it, but this is the principles as they're laid out, and you'll see each one is then followed up by what it means for justice seekers, so what the search for justice entails on us. So it's a statement about the God of justice and then what that means for us. I have some hopes for these principles for justice. It's a slightly new way of doing things, but they've been adopted by the conference, so that's a good start. I hope that we might start to get to know these a bit better and to dig into them. The conference report goes into a lot of the theology behind them, but we can start to explore them and play with them and find where we find hints and resonance and tunes and themes of these throughout the Bible and throughout our lives as well. And then when new issues come up, we can use them to start to discern, to do that practice of working out what God might be saying to us. If we think that this is our foundation, how does that help us move forward together? I really also hope that it might help us to be better at talking about why we do what we do. We're very good at saying, these are the things that we do. We're not so good at saying, we do this because we believe that everyone is made in the image of God. Or we do this because we believe in a God who longs for the flourishing of all creation. Can we get a bit better at talking with each other and possibly with the wider world about why we do justice? And then a hope that I have for the future, which might be a little way down the track, is I would love us, when we are making decisions, to start using the principles for justice. If we've got to make decisions in church councils or in district policy committees about how we spend money or how we deploy people or how we use property or resources, how about we just sit back and say, what might God be saying to us through the principles for justice? What might be the calling on us to be a justice-seeking people at the moment? And to start using these principles for justice to help us to make decisions in the really crunchy things that we have facing us in our churches at the moment. So those are the principles for justice. I would like now to invite you to go into buzz groups and to look at that last question. What are the things that the principles for justice could help us to do in terms of making decisions in our churches? How might they in the future help us to make decisions? Could you come up with some examples or situations where having such principles might help you? I think Sam is going to welcome back, everybody. Welcome back. Would somebody like to start by sharing one suggestion that they came up with for an example or a suggestion or a situation where they might be able to imagine using the principles for justice in a decision-making situation? We've got about 4 minutes or so to share some ideas. If you'd like to wave your hand, we'll see who wants to go first. If you'd rather put it into the chat rather than speak out loud, you're very welcome to do that as well. But this is offering you the chance to use your vocal cords. So would anybody like to speak? I'm not sure whether anybody's typing or if I ought to wait for people to type. Andrew, thank you for putting your hand up.
Sorry, I was just trying to unmute myself. One of the things that was brought up in our group was about we have as a standing item on church councils and so on and so forth, things like safeguarding. Ought we to be having something that says, how can we, a 5-minute conversation that's on every agenda that says, how can we be a more justice-seeking church? what's on our agenda that we're going to talk through, and how do we look at it from a justice perspective?
Mm. Mm.
Uh,
Yes. Yeah.
I know we
Almost.
Methodists
Almost.
love meetings,
Yeah.
but
Yeah. We love. We love our agendas. It's almost a kind of pre-question, isn't it? What's on our
mm,
agenda that we should have a justice lens for, rather than,
yes,
item 29. Um, how can we be more justice? Yeah. Yeah. No, I like that. What's on our agenda already that we ought to?
yes.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I like that. Thank you. Any other thoughts? Anybody wants to share anything? David.
Yeah, we were reflecting a little bit about, as we decide our priorities as individual churches or as circuits, where do we put our resources? It was just struck me that those principles could be a really interesting lens
Mm.
to look at those questions.
Mm.
How the decisions we make as we review circuit life, as we kind of regularly do, does this give us an alternative way of looking at it?
Yeah.
To say, do these principles of justice help us to see where we need to put our resources? Not, resources not necessarily going to places that are already well resourced, which can so often happen.
Yeah, yeah.
So
Thank you.
we were reflecting on some of that in our group.
Yes, thank you. That's a good challenge. That. Thank you. I think I spotted Jenny writing something. How can we be more just in sharing resources? Again, yes, because of finance, ministry has disappeared from some of our marginalised communities. Yeah, that's a kind of connectional conversation we need, isn't it? Or a conversation that draws on our connectionalism as a church. Yeah, thank you. Anything else anybody wants to say or feedback? Well, if not, I will share my screen again. And I'm going to move on to the second P, which is the priorities for justice. And this is a picture, as you can tell, of a rolling snowball. And the question is that when there is so much in the world, how do we stop being that rolling snowball that just keeps picking things up? Because everything is important, isn't it? And we were reflecting briefly in our group when the tendency in the world is to say that everything is going wrong. How do we live in hope and keep the focus on the question of what is ours to do? So this is the challenge of given who we are and what we have, what is ours to do? During the conversations which led up to the report, we invited people in churches to join in and tell us what was important to them. What things they cared about in the world, things that they were active in, and we looked and we listened and saw what was going on. We listened to people who were experiencing injustice. We saw what was important in the world, and from all of that, we identified 5 key priority areas that the Methodist Conference voted on. These won't surprise you, I don't think. Tackling inequality and poverty, enabling a flourishing environment, seeking justice for refugees, opposing discrimination, and pursuing peace. And those 5 areas of poverty, the environment, refugees, discrimination, and peace were identified by the conference as the key priorities for the church. Now, that doesn't mean those are the only things that churches will be committed to working on for justice. There will be things that are of local, real importance, and that's right. And there will be things that are on people's hearts and have been for a long time. But the hope is that by identifying those 5 in a kind of planned and strategic way, we can draw together our focus and resource and momentum around those 5 to really try and support churches in making a difference. What can we do though? What is ours to do? Because those are really big buckets of problems, aren't they? We can't say the Methodist Church is going to ensure justice for all refugees around the world. But through the conversation, 3 things emerged that might be, I think, particularly ours to do as churches, as a Methodist Church. The first one is that we are still rooted in our communities. Wherever we are now, we are still part of those communities. We've heard the stories of what churches are doing, either themselves or as part of partnerships, as members of those communities. Those are places that we know and where we can make a difference. And that might be by offering support or help or relieving poverty. It might be by being alongside the members of those communities and organising for change. We're also a denomination that has a tradition of putting our head above the parapet or above the pulpit even. We not being part of the established church, I think, makes a bit of a difference. We don't really feel the need to be part of the backroom deals. We don't mind protesting or campaigning or being in uncomfortable places as a denomination quite a lot of the time. Taking that prophetic place. And taking that campaigning stance. So the Methodist Church has a tradition of being willing to campaign for change, and that's something that we should be proud of, where we've managed it within our history. So that's something else we can do. We can look for the times when we can take that prophetic place. But we can also, and I think this is one of the most important things that we need to recognise as ours to do as churches, we can tell a new story. You can't imagine a new future unless you can imagine what that future is going to be like. You can't imagine justice unless you can imagine what that justice is going to be like. If you get held in a narrative or a story that is that perpetuates injustice, you can't see your way into that new future unless you hear it. So if all people hear is the narrative around asylum seekers being a burden on taxpayers' money, but don't hear the stories of the gift and the joy and the life that asylum seekers bring to communities, people can't imagine that there is a different story to tell. And if churches can't be some of the people who tell a different story about how the world could be, then I'm not sure who can really. But I think that throughout those 5 priorities, we can see ourselves in making a difference in our communities, in campaigning for change, and in finding ways to tell a new narrative, a new story of how the world can be. I'm hoping that over the next couple of years, we're going to be able to draw together groups of people who are interested, who are active, who are passionate, or who are just longing to do more around those 5 key areas, and find ways of supporting them, offering them a bit of structure or direction, things to do practically or around worship or around campaigning, and perhaps also draw together people who are personally involved, personally engaged, for kind of some networking and support around each of those 5. But that's just at the beginning of this bit of the story, and I'd love further conversations with anybody who's interested in it. The question I've got for this next bit of breakout is this. For each of you, which of those priorities speaks to you? Which one excites you and why? And do you have any ideas about what might be possible if things were done differently or more collaboratively? Again, asking you to dream about what could be done differently. Again, Sam's going to put you into groups for 5 minutes, and then we'll come back and feedback together. Thank you. Welcome back, everybody. Could I invite you just to share your responses to the question that you've been talking about? Which of the priorities excites you? What could you imagine being done differently in the future? Please do just stick your hand up and unmute yourself. Christine.
I couldn't really pick one out. That they all need to go together, and we were saying that it's a sort of a summary of liberation theology. So as I've spent a long time teaching that for me is just, it's wonderful.
So all of them. You're absolutely right about not trying to silo them, though, aren't you? It's yeah. You can't pretend that they are unconnected. Yeah, thank you. What other responses did you come up with in your groups? Heather.
We were talking a little bit about the flourishing environment and the fact that last week was the big plastic count. And I just would think that if we were to do that across our district, or lobby our councils to and say, look, we want to do more. Can you help us, or whatever? You know, what can you do to? Because it's a really serious issue, and we lack the ability to recycle. It's very much a postcode lottery. Some places don't do it at all, others you know, and we end up carrying things from one place to the other to try to maximize the our recycling capabilities.
Yes, yeah, thank you for that. And of course, we've got the net zero drive right the way across the church as well in the flourishing environment, haven't we? Yeah, massive challenges. Oh, Beth, would you like to unpack what you've just put into the chat there?
Yeah. To be a voice to the voiceless means when we experience it, when we know what's going on in the lives of the vulnerable, the people who need to be brought to the light, and kind of we heard from our Israeli or Holy Land representative, Methodist representative, coming and speaking to us the real situation, what's going on there. So when we hear from people or representatives in Ukraine bringing us from Gaza, bringing us the stories, and then we see our hearts melt, and we it's not just giving stuff to the food bank of the refugees, Ukrainian refugees, or being satisfied with whatever that we do, but it's something beyond that comes out of our heart, that we stick up for them, we voice on their behalf, and we lobby on their behalf, we rally around those needs and people. So being a voice to the voiceless, something that I meant. Yeah.
Thank you for that. The Methodist Church is one of the is the driving force behind the Let's End Poverty movement in the run up to the general election, trying to get poverty on the political agenda for all the parties. And the Let's End Poverty movement is a movement of faith groups and trade unions and charities and people with experience of poverty, and it's led by people with experience of poverty. So it's not just kind of groups talking about people, but it's actually people talking from their own experience and shaping the message and the kind of policy asks within that. And that's so important, that it's not talking about people, but actually it's led and shaped by. And if you're not supporting Let's End Poverty yet, that's a really great thing that your churches can be involved with. It's very easy. Let's End Poverty, just Google it. You'll find out more. Something that came in on the chat there. We're in an election year. Thank you, Andrew. Yes. Can we challenge prospective parliamentary candidates with these principles and what they, not their parties necessarily, see as their responsibility? That's great. And the Joint Public Issues team is producing material for hustings as well, to try and get people engaging with their candidates at hustings, but not always at hustings, because hustings aren't always the most popular places, just to have those conversations to challenge them, what difference they think that they can make. Great. Okay, so I'm just going to introduce the last P to you, and have a few minutes of that, few minutes of breakout, and then you can go and have your break before we come back. So the final P is the practices. This is the what we do and how we do it, and this is a river, because this kind of flows through everything. It flows through everything that we do and are concerned about. As we did the work and the kind of the listening in the run up to the report, we noticed that there were some things that we saw when people were seeking justice, when we were at our best. And these were the 5 things that we noticed. We noticed that we were at our best when we're with people, not doing justice to them, not doing justice on their behalf, making decisions about what people wanted, but we're just alongside them and with them. It sounds really practical and obvious, doesn't it? But that's sadly not always people's experience of justice, where they get told what they need, or get defined in terms of their needs, or don't get any agency or dignity in the situation. So how can we be more with people and not for them? The second one is around partnership and how we practice humility in community. This came up in some of the dreams earlier on. We cannot be the provider. We don't want to be the provider for our communities anymore, but we're not in that position any longer. But we can be a partner. We can fulfill our rightful role within communities, but it is one of partnership. So can we lean into that partnership? Can we be at our best in taking that role within our communities? The third one is something that we touched on a bit in the first session, with the quote of Desmond Tutu about sometimes there comes a time when it's no longer enough to pull people out of the river, but we need to go upstream and find out where they're falling in the first place. Can we be about people who are seeking transformation, not just temporary solutions, but holistic transformation of situations, people's lives, people's relationships, justice that is transformative rather than sticking plaster solutions? Are we looking at the symptoms or the causes holistically? Can we be attentive to the use and the misuse of power? Churches often don't like to talk about power, or we like to pretend that we don't have any, or we want to, say that's not for us. Power isn't necessarily a bad thing. Power just is, and it's how we use it that is the important thing. If we pretend that we don't have any, or we pretend it's not in the room, then invariably we're colluding with how power is misused. Now, sometimes we need to give it up. We need to make the space for other people to be able to speak. As Obeth was saying, people who are voiceless need that space, and sometimes we need to shut up and step back and allow people to speak. But sometimes we need to put our power with other people's power in order to be able to make the change. So let's be attentive to how power is used. And then finally, and crucially, we have to remember that we are not just charities with pointy roofs, as Justin Welby once said. We are churches, and we have to root everything that we do in God and in prayer. Now, you will see glimpses of all of these in how you see justice seeking in your churches and your communities all around you. You will also know of situations where these are not present, or where these could happen more. So what I would love to invite you just to reflect on is to think about somewhere that you know well, and to think about what is one step that you could take or could be taken in that situation towards these practices, towards being the best that we can be. towards rooting what we do in prayer, towards seeking transformation, towards being with people more rather than for them. And I would love for churches just to be able to perhaps do an annual audit and look at what they are doing for justice and saying, what's one thing that we could do this year towards using our power well, or making sure that as a worshipping congregation, we are doing all that we can to root what we do in prayer. So I would love to see that kind of annual auditing happening for our practices for justice. I'm not going to ask you to do an annual audit now, but instead I would like you just to explore one thing that you could do to be more with people than for them in something that you're involved with. We're going to set the timer for just 5 minutes, and when the 5-minute comes to an end, you can go and disappear off, and not forever. Please come back. I'd love to have you back again. Go and make yourself a cup of tea, and we will try to come back by. I'm trying to look at the clock. We'll come back by. Just before 8:30, let's say about 27 minutes past 8. So go into your groups now for 5 minutes and then keep you going. Could I invite you just to put in the chat if you manage to identify one thing that you could do or would like to see happen so that we could be more with rather than for when we're doing justice, whatever context you had in mind. I'll invite people to do that as they come back. So to those of you who are coming back, just invite you to put into the comments from your conversations that you just had, one thing that you thought you might do to help you be more with rather than for in the context that you were thinking about in doing justice. I heard a lovely story when I was with the Methodist women in Britain down in Exeter, and a group of them there had been supporting some asylum seekers, and they decided they wanted to collect some clothes for the women, and they decided to have a chat with them and see what kind of clothes that they wanted for themselves or for the children. So they asked them, and the women said, we can make our own clothes. We would love some sewing machines. So instead they rounded up some sewing machines, and the women, the asylum seeking women who were absolute seamstresses, instead were able to make the clothes that they wanted themselves just by asking them. So asking them, the sheer act of asking made all the difference in terms of how the women received the justice and felt that they could have their own agency and dignity. So Heather's suggesting leadership holding open conversations with the whole church community before making decisions, small or large. That's a great way of doing it with, modelling with in our churches. Yeah, thank you, Heather. Anybody else typing? It's very hard to tell when you're all looking down. I don't know whether you're stopping me looking at you and picking on you or whether you're vigorously typing away. Oh, Beth says, getting people empowering connection by the church for worthy purposes, not disprove the saying power corrupts. That's good. The church can be a really good convening place, can't it? Convening space, bringing people together like that. So that's a really helpful suggestion. Thank you. There's another good model as well, instead of holding hustings. So usually you have the MPs at the front and everyone asks them questions. You get the MPs or the candidates at the front, and you have the people or people with experience of injustice are the ones who are telling their stories and doing the ones who are the talking. So the church convenes and the people with power are the ones who listen. So it kind of subverts that model there. Great. Thank you. Okay. So just to remind you, so just as a reminder, this framework that we talked about of the principles for justice, of what we believe about God's justice, the 5 priorities of what we believe is ours to do in this time and this place, and then the practices of how we do justice and how we try and make sure that how we do justice is more and more oriented towards our understanding of God's justice. So that's the framework that is offered. And that's what it is. It's a framework. It is about affirming what's already going on. It's about connecting people, connecting churches who are active, who are longing for justice. It's providing some kind of focus for what's going on so that together we can maximize the impact that we make. And hopefully it's providing some kind of momentum within the church. Somebody talked about the lens that we see things through. Providing that kind of that focus, that lens to give us more energy. That's mixing metaphors horribly. I do apologize for that, but giving us that moment that we have at the moment to help us focus on being a justice-seeking church. There are going to be some strategic resources that come out to support this work over the next few months or so. There's going to be a Bible study to help people focus on the principles for justice later this year. There are going to be the networks that I talked about around the 5 priorities for justice. And then there's going to be that ongoing training around faith-rooted community organising, which supports a lot of the practices for justice. But it's not a strategy that is all about resources or programs or anything like that, because fundamentally at this stage, it's over to you. And it's to say, offering you that framework, that picture, that understanding. I'd like you to think about where you are and how that makes sense for you. Those questions of what you discern God is saying, what is yours to do, and how do you do it? What does that look like for you, and what particular challenges does that offer to you in your church or your community or the particular context where you are? So we're going to go into groups now for the final session. You'll have about 12 minutes in your groups. The first thing I'd like you to do is to choose somebody who's going to give feedback. Now, that might be a volunteer. It might be the person whose birthday falls next in the year. I don't mind how you do it, but the first thing you do is you choose the person to give feedback. And then there are going to be 2 questions. If you did just one more thing to become more of a justice-seeking church, what might it be? And then the second one would be, how could the district or the new Liverpool mission area help you to do it? So if you did one more thing, what might it be? And how might the Liverpool district or the Liverpool mission area in the future help you to do it? And if everybody in the group can think about what their responses to that might be, and if the person with wearing the birthday hat or holding the pen or however you want to put it can come back prepared to summarize and feedback on behalf of your group, we'll do that. As I say, you'll have about 12 minutes in the group together. Thanks very much. So welcome back, everybody, for the final section of our time together. I'm going to ask each group just to feedback briefly the kind of conversation you had about what your first step or your next step might be, and how the district might be able to help and support you in this. So hopefully we've got 3 people who are willing to be spokespeople. Does anybody think they were spokesperson for group 1? If so, wave. Andrew, lovely.
Yeah. Sadly, somebody saw me with a pen in my hand.
It's fatal, that.
Yeah, fatal that. So we had a good conversation. Interestingly, 1, 2, 3, 4 or 5 of the people were Wirral based. So it was quite localized. Here's the. It sounds like the Eurovision Song Contest. Here's the results of the Wirral jury. One church would looking to apply for sanctuary church status. Another thought was about trying to ensure that we can work more ecumenically within. This was me saying it about within Liverpool city centre, and therefore enabling people to play to their strengths rather than us all trying to do the same thing. Neston are looking to go and look at an eco church, because 1 or 2 of the others have already got eco church, either bronze or working towards silver, but Neston haven't. So or strengthening their idea towards eco church. The idea of the general election and the hustings, and actually getting those principles that contained within the Methodist document to the candidates, and actually sort of saying to the candidates, here's our principles, what do you make of them? And actually trying to persuade the candidates to do that. And then another of the churches really was serious about getting the church council to look at things through the lens of justice. So continuing to always ask the question, when something, whether it's finance or property or whatever, how do we look at it through the lens of justice? We sort of half ran out of time to do with how the district can assist. One thought was a bit like the Methodist handbook, where we pray for another church or another geographical area in the world, for example, that the district could enable and get, from a justice perspective, that this one, the Sankey Valley Circuit, are going to pray for the Wirral Circuit, and now they're looking at justice, or whatever it is, something along those lines. So doing it from the mission area type of thing. And I think the district mission areas, where it can come in, is trying to get a united voice on things, because they are the unifying body, as it were. And that's back to knitting all the strands together, so we're all singing off the proverbial same hymn sheet.
Yeah. That's brilliant. Thank you. That's great. And I can see Kate making notes here to feed back to Cheryl, who sadly had to pop off to another meeting already this evening. So thank you very much for that, Andrew. Does anybody think they are feeding back from group 2? Heather, thank you for that.
Can I just ask you, why is it the love ladies who got the pens? Sorry.
I'm not going to go there today, but you can always come and ask me another time. We had an interesting conversation, and we have one church that is quietly working at doing the eco church, and feels that they're having to do it surreptitiously, and so maybe actually having an open meeting and getting more people on board was suggested as an idea. We had another contributor who said that the people, they're doing a lot of giving money to various different charities, whether it's international or national, as a church. But he feels that actually maybe we need to be doing more to look at the root causes of why those charities are needed. and actually do some more campaigning and do some more protesting and writing letters and everything. So that would be the next step for him and his church. We had somebody else who was wondering how they can continue to support some girls in Malawi who they've been helping them with their secondary education, and the 4 years is due to come to a close, but they have dreams. These girls have dreams, want to become doctors and all kinds of other things. And how can the church actually help to see what the next step is? And maybe the district, we didn't talk about the second part of the question, but maybe the district could help finding out more about what the next step might be in something like that. Then we've also got somebody else whose church wants to become an eco-friendly church and become more self-sufficient and self-sustainable, saving time and resources, and is determined to work towards that. And as I say, we didn't manage to get around to the second part of the question, but any suggestions would be very well received, I'm sure.
Great. Thank you very much for that. And that must leave group 3, who is feeding back group 3. David, thank you for that.
Yeah. Yeah, we talked a bit about, rather than trying to think more things to do, how can we adapt the things that we are already doing, so that they're more in line with the things we've been talking about. So I guess we had a couple of examples that were shared. One of a church that's very involved in trying to be inclusive of families, people with special needs, disabilities, giving them a place to be and to share. I guess the part of the need we were hearing there was perhaps a shortage of volunteers. Maybe part of the networking thing around the district might be to say where there's a need and others could help. We talked quite a bit about the idea of actually, as we were touching on earlier, about asking people what they need, actually really listening to people in all the things that we're doing. One quite a nice idea was, say, why don't we put up a little board and invite people to write something on a post-it note and just stick it up so they can contribute anonymously. Well, I thought it was a nice idea. We heard another example of a church where there were lots of different nationalities had started coming to the church over the years, and so they were all given a part to play by each group would take a turn in providing a church lunch, food from their culture. So there was something different every Sunday, and people would stay after church and get to know each other and learn about one another's cultures. So in terms of what the district could do, I think it was about, perhaps sharing what's going on and learning from each other, sharing experiences, and finding if there are ways we can support each other in things that we're doing.
Thank you for that, David, and thank you also for reminding me that that this isn't about necessarily doing something new, and it might be about thinking what's the next step in what we're already doing, or what do we need to put down in order to be able to do this better, and how do we adapt, as you say, what we're already doing so it can be more aligned. When I talked with Cheryl this morning and we were talking about this particular question, she recalled that that Liverpool has a Free Churches Federal Council, still one of the few places that has one. And for a membership fee of just £25, you can join the FCFC and then start applying for grants of up to £500. So if there's anything that has struck you that finances, pot of finance might enable you to do that, then possibly exploring joining the Free Churches Federal Council for Liverpool might be one way to do that. I'm sure there are many others, but that's one that she asked us to flag up this evening if you're not already a member. Yeah, don't just join them for the money, obviously. They're a good thing, I'm sure, but she did flag that one up. Thank you very much. It's always lovely just to hear those good kind of glimpses of what might be the next steps, but also to hear about the ways in which you've identified ways that the district, the new mission area, could support you, but also how you could support each other, and that sense of sharing knowledge and information, but also praying for each other is absolutely crucial to taking this commitment forward, this commitment to being a justice-seeking church together, and going back to those dreams that we shared at the beginning of what a justice-seeking church could be like, as we're all on that journey together, and you are in Liverpool. So thank you ever so much for your time this evening. If I can remind you, if you want to find copies of that, then just go on the Methodist Church website and look for Justice, you'll find it, or go on Methodist Publishing website, you'll find it there. Please do get in touch or keep in touch. Please do share my email, Christine, if that would help with people. I love to hear stories, I love to hear how you're getting on, but also barriers and obstacles and ideas and conversations that people are having. Please do keep in touch. Thank you ever so much for having me. And I think I'm passing back over to Christine, who's going to close with a prayer this evening.
Sorry, Rachel, just before you do that, can I just say, on a climate change type thing, you can actually download the report because it's out of the conference notes and it's capable of being downloaded from the Methodist Church website without actually wasting the paper.
Yeah, you can download the full 30,000 word conference report, and you can also download the pretty PDF one, which is shorter.
Yeah.
That's a very good reminder. Thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you. Before closing, Cheryl, as Rachel said earlier, has had to go to another meeting, and so was very, very disappointed that that had happened. So can I say, I think on everybody's behalf, a huge thanks to Rachel. She accepted the invitation to come with great enthusiasm. So thank you for that. Took no persuasion whatsoever. And thank you for all the time that you have given to working with us to make this happen, and for 2 very challenging and interesting evenings. So many, many thanks, Rachel. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
So shall we pray together?
Yes.
For the challenges and the conversations, for the learning and the sharing, for a glimpse of the possibility of a church more committed to justice and peace. For the reminder that we are called to do justice and walk humbly with God. And for these things and for so much else, we give thanks. Now go out to celebrate with love and compassion. Go as lights of the world to shine in the darkness. Go out, act justly, and walk humbly with our God. And go in the name of him who loved and laughed and who is the light of the world. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, everyone. I'm going now. It's been really nice having you company. I feel I've got to know a lot of new friends.
Oh, thank you, Patricia. Thank you.
And thank you so
Patricia.
much, Rachel. Good night.
Thank you,
God bless.
Patricia.
Good
Bye-bye.
night.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night, everyone.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Rachel.
No, it's really, really good to be able to do. Thank you for asking me. And yeah, do keep in touch, and
Yes.
I'm very happy to do anything that helps. And I love
Thank you.
I love hearing stories as well. So let me know if anything happens.
I know it's been great working with you again.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Rachel.
Appreciated it. Great. All right. Well,
Take care, everyone.
all the best, and speak to you
you.
again soon.
Speak
All right.
soon.
Okay,
Take care
bye.
then.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.